The letter from my lawyer felt heavier than a brick in my hands. It was the final piece of paper that was supposed to sever the last toxic tie. All this over a set of vintage champagne flutes my grandmother left me. Sounds ridiculous, right? But it was never about the glasses. It was about the principle. It was about my mother Helen and her new husband Robert, trying to rewrite history, to erase my father's side of the family from my life as if they'd never existed. And I was just supposed to let them to be the accommodating daughter I'd always been. I'm in my late 20s now. A graphic designer working freelance. I've carved out a good life for myself in a small, sunny apartment in San Diego, a world away from the gloomy, passive-aggressive suburbs of Chicago where I grew up. I have a circle of friends who feel more like family, a career I'm proud of, and a peace I fought tooth and nail for. But the past, it seems, has a long reach and it doesn't care about your hard-won peace. My early childhood was golden. It was just me and my dad. My mother Helen left when I was 4. I have no memory of her walking out, just a vague, warm sense of a presence that vanished, leaving a dad-shaped hole that my father worked tirelessly to fill. He was a history teacher, a quiet, kind man with ink-stained fingers and a bottomless well of patience. He was my world. He'd take me to work with him sometimes and I'd sit in the back of his classroom, coloring while he talked about ancient Rome. Our house was filled with books, the smell of his pipe tobacco, and a deep, abiding love. We weren't rich, but we were rich in everything that mattered. He died of a sudden heart attack when I was 16. The world stopped. The foundation of my life crumbled to dust. The grief was a physical weight, a constant ache in my chest. I had no other close family. My father was an only child and his parents had passed years before. My mother's family was a mystery. It was just me. That's when Helen swooped back in. She'd gotten a call from the school, I suppose. She arrived at the funeral in a black dress, looking more like a grieving widow than the woman who'd abandoned us over a decade prior. She had a new man with her, Robert. He was all sharp angles and expensive watches, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. She looked at me with wet, shining eyes. "My poor baby," she'd whispered, pulling me into a hug that smelled of unfamiliar, cloying perfume. "You're coming home with me now." I had no choice. I was a minor. The house I'd grown up in was rented. My father's life insurance was a pittance. I was utterly powerless. So I packed my life into 2 suitcases, said goodbye to my friends, and moved into Helen and Robert's sterile beige McMansion in a suburb that felt like a movie set. Everything was new, perfect, and utterly soulless. First Helen tried. Or she performed trying. She bought me new clothes, trying to replace my worn-in band t-shirts and jeans with preppy brand-name outfits. She'd ask about my day with a frantic, desperate energy, but her eyes would glaze over before I finished a sentence. Robert was worse. He was cold, perpetually disappointed. He'd make comments about my sloppy posture, my unambitious career dreams. I wanted to be an artist, God forbid, and the music I listened to. He referred to my father as that teacher, his tone dripping with condescension. I felt like a ghost in their house, a sad, inconvenient relic from a life Helen was desperate to forget. She had reinvented herself as Robert's wealthy, sophisticated wife, and I was a glaring, messy reminder of her past. My grief was an embarrassment. My love for my father was a threat. I learned to be quiet, to stay in my room, to make myself small. I lived for the emails from my old friends, for the few boxes of my dad's things I'd managed to salvage, his favorite books, his record collection, a few photos. The final straw, the one that broke the camel's back for good, happened about 6 months after I moved in. I came home from school to find my bedroom empty. My boxes were gone. The books, the records, the photos. All of it vanished. I ran downstairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. Helen was in the kitchen arranging tulips in a vase. "Where are my things?" My voice was shaking. She didn't even look up. "Oh honey, that old junk. We had the cleaners in today. Robert said it was just clutter gathering dust. We've made so much space for you to get new nice things." Junk. The word was a sob. That was my dad's stuff. Those were his books. His records. Finally, she looked at me, her expression a mix of irritation and pity. "Lily, you have to move on. Clinging to all that sadness, it's not healthy. This is your home now. With us. We're your family." I stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time. This wasn't just neglect. It was an active erasure. She wasn't just a distant mother. She was a vandal, destroying the last physical connections I had to the only parent who had ever loved me. "You had no right," I whispered, the rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. "I had every right," she said, her voice hardening. "I'm your mother." That was the night I checked out. I stopped talking to them almost entirely. I got a job as a waitress, saved every penny. The day I turned 18, I was gone. I took a bus to California with a backpack and $500 to my name. I didn't leave a note. The first few years were a brutal struggle. Couch surfing, working 2 jobs, attending community college for design classes. I was hungry, tired, and lonely, but I was free. Every time I thought about giving up, I'd remember the empty space where my father's records used to be, and I'd find the strength to keep going. Spite, as they say, is a powerful fuel. I built my life from nothing. I built a career. I paid my own way through a proper university. I created a home for myself filled with things I loved. I even started collecting vintage records again, a quiet, stubborn tribute to my dad. I had limited, structured contact with Helen. A brief, awkward phone call on Christmas. A text on my birthday. She'd send emails with generic life updates, always subtly probing about my financial situation. I kept my answers vague and distant. She knew I was doing well, but I never gave her details. I'd built a fortress around my life, and she was firmly on the outside. Then about a year ago, my grandmother on my father's side passed away. She was the last of that line. She left me a small inheritance, but more importantly, she left me her personal effects. Among them was a beautiful set of Art Deco champagne flutes. They were the ones she and my grandfather had used on their wedding day. They were the last tangible link I had to my father's family, to the people who had actually loved and raised me. Cherished them. Somehow Helen found out about them. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. It was long, rambling, and dripping with faux nostalgia. "Dearest Lily, I heard the sad news about your grandmother. My condolences." It brought back so many memories of my own mother, your other grandmother, God rest her soul. She always believed in family heirlooms, in passing things down. It's so important to honor that. I remember she had a beautiful set of crystal champagne flutes. I've been thinking, as the matriarch of the family now and as your mother, those really should come to me. They're a part of our family history after all. Robert and I entertain so much more than you do in your little apartment. They'd be used and appreciated here. It's what your grandmother would have wanted. Please send them to me at your earliest convenience. I read the email 3 times. The audacity took my breath away. Our family history? Matriarch? She had never even met my father's mother. She was trying to claim the last remnants of my father's legacy as her own. It was the same pattern, the same erasure, just dressed up in different clothes. My reply was brief and final. "Helen, the flutes were left to me by my grandmother. They are a cherished memory of my father and his family. They will remain with me. They are not yours to claim." The silence that followed was brief, and then the storm hit. First came the pleading emails, then the angry ones, then the guilt-tripping voicemails. "After everything I've done for you. What exactly? Abandon me?" then throw away my father's things. You're being selfish. Robert says you have no sense of family duty. I blocked her email. I blocked her number. I thought that was the end of it. I was naive. A month later, I came home from a coffee run to find a package on my doorstep. It was a large flat-rate box, addressed in Helen's loopy, familiar handwriting. A cold dread settled in my stomach. I took it inside and opened it. It was filled with photo albums. Not my photos. Her photos. Pictures of her and Robert on vacation. Pictures of their fancy dinners. Pictures of their perfectly decorated house. There was a note on top. Since you're so intent on keeping your family's things, I thought you should have these. This is your real family, Lily. Look at what you're rejecting. We are your history now. Send the flutes. I sat on my floor, surrounded by these images of a life I'd never been a part of, a life that had actively excluded and erased me. It wasn't a gift, it was a threat. It was a declaration. Your past is what I say it is. I packed the albums back into the box and shipped it back to her, no note. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, my doorbell rang at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. I looked through the peephole. Robert was standing there, his face a mask of grim determination. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the wood. What do you want, Robert? Open the door, Lily. We need to talk like adults. We have nothing to talk about. Leave or I'll call the police. His voice hardened. Your mother is heartbroken. Those flutes belong to her. It's a matter of principle. Now stop this childishness and open the door. They were my grandmother's. They were left to me. Wiggly. Morley. In every way that matters. Now get off my property. He started pounding on the door, not hard but persistent, intimidating. Bang. 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 We are not leaving until we resolve this, Lily. You will not disrespect your mother like this. I called the police. When they arrived, Robert was all smarmy charm. Just a family misunderstanding, officers. My stepdaughter is a bit emotional. But the cops saw the box of returned photos on my doorstep. I'd left it there as evidence of the prior harassment, and heard the fear in my voice. They told him to leave and not to return. It was a warning. I didn't feel safe. The fortress had been breached. I went to a lawyer that Monday. We sent a formal cease and desist letter, demanding they stop all contact regarding the flutes and any other matter. The response was a single typed line on a sheet of paper mailed back to my lawyer. We will not be silenced. The flutes are ours by right of family. It was unhinged. It was also the last piece of evidence we needed. My lawyer advised a restraining order. The harassment, the attempted intimidation, the delusional belief that they had a right to my property, it was more than enough grounds. Getting a restraining order against your own mother is a surreal, gut-wrenching experience. You have to sit in a courtroom and list all the reasons the woman who gave birth to you is a threat to your peace and safety. You have to reduce a lifetime of complex pain to bullet points on a legal form. But I did it. And it was granted. For a few weeks, there was blissful silence. I started to breathe again. I thought the legal system had finally gotten through to them. I was wrong. I came home from a movie with friends one night to find my front door slightly ajar. My blood ran cold. I pushed it open slowly, my heart in my throat. The living room was a disaster. Cushions were thrown on the floor, books pulled from their shelves. But it was targeted. They weren't looking for electronics or cash. I ran to the display cabinet where I kept the champagne flutes. It was empty. The box they'd come in was sitting on the floor nearby, discarded. They had broken into my home, violated my sanctuary, and taken the one thing they knew I cherished most. It wasn't about the value of the glass. It was about the ultimate act of erasure. They had finally succeeded in stealing my past. I was numb. I called the police. I gave them Helen and Robert's names and address. I showed them the restraining order. It was a clear violation. The police went to their house. They found the flutes, carefully wrapped and placed on the mantelpiece in Helen's formal living room. She was arrested for burglary and violating a restraining order. Robert, who had driven the getaway car, was arrested as an accomplice. The court case was swift. They pleaded guilty, likely on the advice of their lawyer, hoping for leniency. They didn't get much. The judge saw the restraining order, heard the history of harassment, and saw the breaking and entering for what it was: a malicious, premeditated act. Helen got 6 months in county jail. Robert got 3. They were both given 5 years of probation and a permanent restraining order, meaning they can never contact me again. I got the flutes back. I held one in my hand, its cool, precise weight feeling more significant than ever. It was no longer just a memento of my grandmother. It was a trophy of a battle I had won. It was proof that I had defended my history, my truth, and myself. I keep them in a safety deposit box now. I don't need to look at them every day to remember. The memory of that fight and the victory is etched into me. Sometimes the family you're born into is just a place to start. The family you build, the person you become in spite of them, that's your real legacy. My fortress is secure again, the walls higher and stronger than before. And I am finally, completely and unequivocally free.